Species unite.
Species unite.
Right from the beginning, I think I was infected with this disease. It's a very, very contagious disease of not knowing how to say no to an animal in distress. So, alongside the bears, we were rescuing everything else: crocodiles, snakes, birds, deer, foxes, jackals, you name it.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with Kartick Satyanarayan. Kartik is the co-founder and CEO of Wildlife SOS. They run several projects to support bear conservation in India, including the largest rehabilitation center in the world for sloth bears. Kartik is often referred to as the bear man of India because of his efforts to put an end to the illegal practice of dancing bears. Not only does Wildlife SOS work to protect bears, they work to protect and conserve India's natural heritage, forest biodiversity, and to protect all wildlife. It's nice to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Let's start with a background on who you are. I know you've been doing this for almost 30 years. So it's a big background, but just so people get an understanding. And then we're going to get specific.
My name is Kartick Satyanarayan, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wildlife SOS. I'm headquartered out of India, and I've been working to save wild animals and help people become more tolerant. I've been doing this for over 30 years now. And this is all I've known. This is all I've done ever since I've been a young boy. And the reason I got hooked to doing this was I was curious as a child. I was crazy about critters, little creepy crawlies, chasing snakes and butterflies. And then growing up through school, I started spending time in the forests near where I was growing up in the city of Bangalore. And I'd go on full moon nights to the woods, sit on top of trees around a waterhole quietly and watch herds of elephants and bears and leopards and other animals come to the waterhole to drink. And I think I can never forget that. That magic is what hooked me to wanting to save the natural wealth of India and the natural treasures that we have that very few people realize how rapidly we are losing them. So I decided to dedicate this lifetime, in this time, to the service of nature and wildlife.
When did you first become aware that there was a threat to these animals that you loved so much?
I think when I was young, I started realizing that people were highly intolerant. People would see a snake and they would be like, let's kill it, let's squash it, let's burn it. And everything was about destroying nature's creatures. And that showed a high level of ignorance as well as a high level of intolerance. And I was like, why would you want to kill something that has done nothing to you? Why are you so scared? And so I overcame all those fears. I learned how to catch geckos and lizards and snakes and handle them and work with animals of every kind. And it always surprised me that people were so terrified of animals. And that was largely because they were ignorant, largely because people were unwilling to invest time and energy to learn more about those species so they could empower themselves with the knowledge of those animals. I mean, if you talk to someone and say, why are you so scared of snakes? Do you realize that snakes don't have hands? They don't have legs like you have. They cannot run. They walk on their ribs. They do not have ears. And they're like, really? I said, if I tied you up and you couldn't move, your legs were bound behind and your hands were gagged, tied behind you, and you were gagged and you couldn't hear anything and you had to crawl on your ribs on the floor, how long would you survive? And they would say, wow, I mean, that's a difficult thing to do. I would say, well, that's what the whole existence of a snake is all about. Why are you so intolerant? Why are you so scared of something so weak and so insignificant? It's not like it's going to jump out at you like a leopard and eat you up. But not that leopards do that at all. I mean, leopards are also severely misunderstood creatures. So I became aware of the large disparity of what was going on around us at a very young age. And right from that age, I really wanted to wake people up, get them to feel and understand and realize how wrong a path we are on often.
What prompted you to start Wildlife SOS? You started this in the 90s, right?
Yes, I started Wildlife SOS in the mid 90s, in 1995 to be precise. But there was one incident that catalyzed me and all my efforts and my intentions into wanting to create foundation, a charitable organization that would work to changing people's mindsets, to protecting animals actively in the field, and to make a difference on the ground in this lifetime. And that incident was seeing a group of forest offenders, forest criminals in action. So I was doing this line transit in the middle of the woods. It was evening, the sky was getting overcast, the wind really howled that evening. I knew it was going to start raining in a little while. And the sounds of the forest change when you're in the middle of the woods. And I sometimes feel that when I'm in the forest, my blood turns green. I feel a complete change of how I feel when I'm inside the forest. I know you guys call it the woods, but here we call it the jungle. I was in the middle of the jungle and I heard a sound that was very unusual. It was hacking sound. Somebody was hacking away at a tree. And this was inside a national park, a forest that is protected. It has the highest level and the highest degree of protection under Indian law. And so I said, like, who would be cutting a tree in the middle of a protected forest? So this was a very dense area and it was also summer. So the ground was blanketed with dry leaves. So if you walked on it, they would make a lot of crackling noise. So I was walking very carefully without making that noise. And then I see this, group of people from far. I was quite far away from them. And I was wearing camouflage so they couldn't see me. And I had one tribal assistant with me. And we were walking in a single file. And I saw them, they were making furtive glances, looking around. They were scared. So I realized that they were breaking the law and they knew they were breaking the law. And they were cutting down some trees that were perhaps 80 to 100 years old. And these are very valuable trees in terms of not money value, but valuable for the ecosystem because they probably are, are homes to thousands of little critters and maybe hundreds of birds and all kinds of animals probably take shelter and refuge in those trees. And so these people would be doing irreparable damage to wildlife and to the national park over there by doing this. And they'd already cut several trees. And I came upon them when they were still in the middle of hacking down another one. And so I knew if I went all the way back to the main road and then took a jeep, drove back to the forest camp, reported this crime to the authorities, and they came to take action, it would be hours and these guys would be gone.
Yeah.
There was no way we could make any difference. So I decided to kind of a little bit take the law into my hands. So me and my tribal assistant took a bunch of stones, we threw it down the slopes with all the dry leaf litter. And then we screamed loudly, like, let's get them, surround them, like we were a gang of 50 people. And those guys heard the sounds of those rocks tumbling down, those dry leaf litter pathways, and got the impression that many people were coming from different directions. And they all started running because they realized that they had broken the law, and somebody was on to them. And we couldn't chase everybody. So I spotted one guy who seemed to be running slower than the rest. And so I chased him, and I went after him till a point where he kept running through the forest, and we were kind of going through different pathways, dense bushes. And then finally he reached a point when he could run no further because the foliage around him was very dense. So he turned around towards me menacingly, and he lifted his machete, to say, I'm going to attack you. And I was terrified. Of course, my adrenaline was pumping, my heart was beating in my mouth. And I had something called a rangefinder, which is like a pair of binoculars, but it gives you the distance between where you're standing and, let's say, a herd of deer in the forest. So it's like a black box, but if handled the right way, you could make it look like a weapon. So I pulled that out of my pocket and I pointed it at him. And I said, well, if you don't drop that machete down, I don't know what will happen. And of course, I couldn't have said I will shoot it because I knew I didn't have a gun in my hand. And he thought it was a gun. It was dusk, like I said. It was already almost getting dark. And so he dropped the machete, and me and my tribal assistant were able to overpower him. We tied him up, tied his hands behind him, and then walked him back to the road, put him in a jeep, and took him back to the forest office. Everybody else, all the other offenders had disappeared. And then I took him back to the forest office and reported him. And they took action. They were able to, with the intelligence from that one man, they were able to get the details of all the other offenders. They took action against them. They were all arrested. So I'd made a small difference, very small, albeit. But when I told my team, my research team that I was working with, that I had done this, they were very upset with me. They said, oh, well, the data was more important. You should have continued the data. I said, well, I'm happy to do another 5-kilometer walk through the forest to regather that data that I lost. But what do you do when you see an offense like this? So my supervisor at that time said, well, I mean, these things happen. You shouldn't really be worrying about it. You've got to focus on data. That's your job. That's what you've got to do. And as a wildlife biologist on the ground, I could not digest that. I felt, my integrity would be compromised. So I said, well, let me ask you this. If I was doing a similar transit through the forest and I see a poacher having killed a tiger and they are skinning it, what am I supposed to do? Should I continue gathering my data or should I take action? And they said, well, continue your data gathering, come back and then report him to the authorities. I said, but you do realize he's not going to wait around. The offender, this is a poacher we are talking about. He's going to, move from there. He's going to scramble the minute he's finished his task. But they couldn't be bothered. So that taught me that, okay, what this calls for is a different level of commitment. It calls for a different level of engagement. And I was willing to do that. And I was going to do that. And so that was kind of the turning stage of my life. So after that, I finished a few more weeks of my assignment, left my duty over there, resigned from my job, came back. And that's when I decided that I was going to start Wildlife SOS. And it was an SOS for all wildlife. So Geeta and I are the two founders of this organization. It was born in a garage in Delhi. And in order to register the charity, we needed $200. And it took us 3 years to raise $200 to register it.
And now here we are almost 30 years later.
We have almost 500 staff who work around the clock to help wildlife in distress, help make a difference. And we have a great volume of supporters who believe in us, who trust us, and who engage with us to make a difference on the ground. And we've saved thousands and thousands of birds, reptiles, mammals. And at the moment, we have, nearly 40 rescued elephants in our care. We've rescued over 628 sloth bears, and of course, innumerable numbers of reptiles, birds, and smaller mammals. Almost on a daily basis, there's never a dull moment for us.
I saw your TED talk. I was actually at that TED in 2009.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
how cool
nice.
is that? Yes, about the
That's
bears.
amazing.
Yeah, so pretty cool. Did you start with the bears?
Yes, indeed. That was our first project. And Geeta brought it to our attention. And she said, can you believe it that these bears are being exploited in this manner? And I was horrified. And so I said, well, let's find out more. So she said, yeah, let's investigate it. So that's how a 30-month-long investigation started.
Explain what was happening with the bears.
So Geeta brought to our notice that there was this community, local, indigenous, nomadic gypsy community called the Kalandars, who used an endangered species of bear called the sloth bear that's only found in India. And they would use these bears on the streets and make them perform tricks for begging. So these were street performing animals, and they had a rope that would go through their muzzle and through their nostril, or sometimes through their cheek. And then that rope was what would control them. And so we said, let's find out more about this. Who are these people? Where do these bears come from? How do they get these bears? How do they train them? There were so many questions we had to answer. And if this is an endangered species that's protected under the law in India, how are these people able to get away with it? Because the sloth bear in India has the same level of protection as a tiger or an elephant under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So how are these people able to get away with this? And so that's how we launched a 2.5 year long investigation to find out about this. And that took us across the country. We traveled to over 13 states, lived with these communities in over 72 villages, stayed with them, learned about their culture, learned about their traditions, and learned everything we could about bears. And what we found out had us completely gobsmacked, because the bears we found out were being poached from the forests as cubs. Every single bear that we saw with this community was taken from the forest. The mother bears were being killed by poachers. The baby bears would be pulled out of their dens and shoved into bags unceremoniously, and then transported over hundreds of miles and then sold to this community, the Kalandar gypsies, who would then hold down these bear cubs. And four adult men would hold down a bear cub the size of a puppy, and then use a metal rod and smash the teeth out so they wouldn't get bitten. And not just that, they would use then a red hot iron poker and push it down from between the eyes down into the muzzle of the bear cub. And this is a small 8-week-old baby bear that we're talking about. And of course, the bear would be yowling and screeching like a little baby. And these four men would hold it down as they did this. And you could, if you were nearby, you could smell the burning flesh as that red hot iron poker went through the muzzle. And then they would shove a very thick, coarse rope dipped in oil, sesame oil or mustard oil, into that hole. And then that would come out either through the nostril or through the cheek. And the pain that wound would cause was necessary for them to train the bear cub, so they would not treat that wound. They would leave it untreated. So the festering pain from that, combined with the pain of the teeth having been shattered, and then constant beatings and yankings with those ropes, is what trained these baby bears into becoming dancing bears. The term dancing bears came into existence because when they pulled and yanked at these ropes that went through the muzzle of this bear and caused it pain, the bear would obviously stand up and hop because it was in pain. But it gave the public an impression that this bear was dancing, jumping up and down. And that's how the term dancing bears came into existence. And we saw that there were, over 1,200 bears across the country that were being used for this kind of street performance by these communities. And what intrigued us also was that this community depended on these bears for their livelihood. So each bear going out with the master of the family out on the street every day, and they were nomadic, so they would move from place to place with their bears. And that bear would earn them enough money to support the entire family. So it was also a socio-economic issue. So the problem was quite complex. We had a marginalized community, a minority community, using wildlife which was not in compliance with the law. So they were breaking the law, but they needed them for their economic support and their livelihood. Now, how do you solve something like this? So we went to the government of India, and the government of India and the authorities extended their support to us in terms of land. They said, we can help you with the land, we can help you with assistance, we can point you in the right direction. But what we cannot get involved with is this whole thing because it's a very controversial issue. So let us know how you get along as you move forward. So we were like, oh my God, what have we taken on here? And then we started working towards finding a solution that was sustainable, but also made sure that we could keep these people out of jail, because it doesn't help to criminalize a community that is trying to solve their livelihood issue, but they don't know that it's illegal. Some of them knew this was breaking the law, but they were getting away with it because a lot of the enforcement agencies were kind, sympathetic, they looked the other way. They would not enforce the law necessarily, but there were instances where some of them were getting jailed. The main income earner for the family, the bread earner of the family, would be in jail, which would push the entire family into abject poverty. And our goal was to try and address the issues of poverty, livelihood, and wildlife conservation in a way that would help take care of this whole problem that's gone on for 400 years in India. We had very little time to solve it. We only had one lifetime, right, to solve this. So we started doing a survey, talking to the youngsters in the community, the older people in the community, involving the elders of the Kalandar community, and we found out all about the history. It turned out that, four brothers entered India 400 years ago with their families, and they brought bears and monkeys and other animals from Persia into India, and they were primarily entertainers of the harem of the Mughal emperors, who back in the day, hundreds of years ago, had these big harems and these big forts, and these men would take their bears and other animals to go and entertain the women who were not allowed to be seen, apparently, by others. So that had reduced and become like a cheap street side performance that the community still depended on. So as we started speaking to the community and asking them, is this something you still want to continue? Because your children don't go to school, you have absolutely no literacy in the entire community. So what do you see as a future for your children? And they said, well, we've done bear dancing all our lives. Our children will also do it, and so will our grandchildren. So we said, well, but it's illegal. How are you going to address that? So we started engaging with the community in discussions and talks. And sometimes they would chase us out with swords and axes and spears, saying, get out of here because you're coming here to talk to us about our livelihoods. You might take it away. And some of them welcomed us. So we chose the ones that welcomed us, started more detailed discussions with them. And then we said, well, you have a lot of social evils. So we identified certain social evils within the community, and some of them included child marriage. A lot of the girls would be married off at the age of 10, 11, or 12 to much older men. And that was again illegal as well. The other issue was complete illiteracy. The girls would not be sent to school. Very patriarchal community. They would only send the boys for religious education. So that was another challenge that we had to address. Women were not allowed to earn. The men were the primary bread earners, and they would use a lot of their money, waste a lot of the money on alcohol. And the alcoholism was resulting in the children not getting good nutrition or hygiene. The village, some of these settlements had no toilets, no drinking water. So one of the things that Geeta and I started doing through Wildlife SOS was bringing them drinking water. They would have to walk 5 miles to get a pot of water to drink. And so we started with that. And then we started encouraging them about education. We said, well, 400 years has not brought you any closer to a higher level of social security. How about we look at education for all your children? And they looked at the children as income earning devices. So they wanted to send all the kids, farm them out to labor sites so they could go to construction sites and bring back a few bucks for the family. We said, well, that's not good enough because your kids are going to remain illiterate if you don't do that, if you don't change that. And so we started offering them that if you send your children to school, we will pay for all the school fees, we will pay for the books, we will give them their school uniforms, their shoes, everything that's needed, so they can sit next to any child in any school, in the local schools, and your children will have a brighter future that you couldn't have. And we were planting these seeds in the community, and we started empowering the women. We found that they were the most intelligent people in the whole community. The men were going after us very often. So the women understood the common sense and the intelligence behind getting the children to school. And so we started helping the women with alternative livelihoods, giving them seed funding, teaching them skill sets like carpet weaving, embroidery, candle making, things like that. And then they started reciprocating by saying, okay, I would like my kids to go to school. I will convince my husband, please send my children to school. And we ended up sending over 11,000 children to school. The Wildlife SOS paid for the school fees, the books, the school uniforms, and we identified local schools so they could go nearby, sit with other children from other communities, so they would be introduced to mainstream society and they would survive after that, after that school experience. It also enabled us to address child marriage, and we said, well, you cannot send your children off to get married. You have to wait till they're 18, which is the legal marriageable age in India. And until then, we will send them to school. We will support that. So that was a wonderful point of time in our effort with the Kalandar community, where we were able to get the women to start accepting our help and the children to start going to school. Finally, the men came on board. We started giving them alternative ways of earning a living. We taught them the ropes. Some of them became drivers. We gave them seed funding of about $2,000 to each family to get tuk-tuks or auto rickshaws, as we call them. These are three-wheeler vehicles. You've seen them. You've been to India.
Yeah.
And it helped them. What they were earning with the bear was 1/6 of what they were earning with the transport vehicle or the new forms of livelihood that we were giving them. Some of them became shopkeepers. They started setting up small shops in their villages, and others became traders, generator, rental. I mean, the list is long.
Wow.
And with anything that they could do, as long as it would keep them sustained, supported, give them a higher level of income than what they were earning from the bears, and it would keep them away from the bears for sure.
Wow.
Now, in order to do all this, they of course had to surrender the bears to the forest department, which was the regulatory authority, and we collaborated with the authorities, the forest authorities and the wildlife protection authorities, who would then hand the bears over to us. And so now we were faced with this other quandary of, okay, we've helped the people, we've helped the women, we've helped the children. Now we've got all these bears, hundreds of bears. What are we going to do with them? So we had to set up 4 sanctuaries, rehabilitation centers. The one that we have in Agra, the Agra Bear Rescue Facility, as we call it, it's the largest rehabilitation center for sloth bears in the entire world. It's almost 265 acres. It has, and we ended up rescuing 628 bears.
How were
And
these bears like once they get out? How do they recover? What's it like for them?
so when the bears come in, when we rescue them, I must say that it's almost a nightmare. What these bears have gone through. They are in absolute pain. They're in misery. They're in horrific condition. They have pussing, bleeding muzzles. Some of them are blind because the rope that goes over their eye has blinded them. Some of them are lame. They came in with a lot of diseases like tuberculosis and all other kinds of diseases. So we had to kind of, it was like putting Humpty Dumpty together. They came in a completely broken mess, and they had worm infestation. So we would start by just putting these bears through a very carefully calibrated quarantine procedure of 90 days, where we would deworm the bears, we would check all their claws, their teeth, put them through x-rays, do ultrasounds to check if they've got anything going on in their liver. They had all kinds of problems, and they'd never seen food. I mean, they would be given a couple of rotis or bread pieces primarily. They didn't know what a fruit was. So we'd have to introduce them to papayas and watermelon and things like that. And we started giving them, and we realized that the teeth had all been broken, so they couldn't chew. They were challenged dentally. So we had to bring in veterinary dentists from the UK who would come and teach our vets on how to do root canal surgeries on bears. And so we had to really address the dental crisis that we had with this whole population of bears because they just couldn't chew. And so we created a special diet for these bears to address their nutritional needs, but also something which would be cooked porridge, multi-grain porridge with eggs, honey, and dates, so that they would get the nutrition but would not have to be challenged by the inability to chew. And some of them had holes all over their faces where they had been punctured to put the rope through, so that when they would eat, the food would come out of different places from their face. And it was horrific, but it was very fulfilling to see the change we could make. The Wildlife SOS story of change for these bears was really life changing for me and for my team at Wildlife SOS. We could see what a world of difference we were making for every single bear that we rescued and for every family that surrendered the bear to us.
What an incredible story, though. I mean, and it's like one of those stories where if you actually look at the entire picture like you did, how many solutions just start happening, right? And it's almost like they're contagious off each other, and everybody wins.
That was the key. That was the key takeaway for us. We wanted to make sure that it was a win-win at all levels. And you know what makes me really thrilled and proud, Beth, is that today those children are now applying for masters and postgraduate diplomas, and these are the same kids who were getting married off when they were 10 and 11 and they didn't have a hope in life for doing anything else. And the fact that we've been able to give them that educational opportunity, the opportunity that changed their lives forever, they will never go back to dancing bears or begging on the streets using animals. And for that opportunity, I am very grateful because it makes me feel so fulfilled.
Yeah.
And that, this lifetime, if I drop dead this minute, I feel that I've been able to use my lifetime on this planet in a very, very useful way.
Right. It's absolutely incredible. While you were in this with the bears, were you also rescuing other animals, or were you guys just bears at that time?
Right from the beginning, I think I was infected with this disease. It's a very, very contagious disease of not knowing how to say no to an animal in distress. So, alongside the bears, we were rescuing everything else: crocodiles, snakes, birds, deer, foxes, jackals, you name it. antelope. We just were rescuing everything that needed support, at the same time also engaging local communities. But our affair with elephants started when we were rescuing some of our bears on our way to Agra, which is where our biggest bear sanctuary is. We would see this one elephant called Champa, and Champa is the Hindi word for jasmine, a jasmine flower. And we would see her very body trundling along on the freeway, and we would know that in summer the tar on the road is melting because sometimes it hits nearly 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can imagine, I mean, it would be very hard to be walking on hot tarmac with your naked feet. But that's what she was being made to do. And it would make me cringe to look at her. And so we started talking to her, the handlers who were working with this elephant. And we said, listen, can we offer some help? Because she had a huge abscess on her front feet, the right front foot to be precise. And she needed help. And so we said, well, can we start helping you? Can we start giving you some medicine, and can we start helping the elephant? And so they started helping, allowing us to help her. And that was how we started talking about Champa, the elephant that got us all inspired to make a difference in this lifetime to other elephants in distress. And so eventually, those people who had Champa with them couldn't look after her. They were giving her tobacco and all kinds of things because they weren't able to handle her pain. They weren't able to treat her properly, and they handed Champa over to us to look after her. Sadly, Champa lived with us for a very short time because she was already very sick when we received her, and she didn't make it. But she inspired us and left us with a message that elephants in India need support, need care, and they need everything we can give them in terms of help. And that's what inspired us to create a facility, because when you look at captive elephants in India, every single elephant in captivity has been taken from the wild. Every single one of them. And once they are captive, you cannot put them back in the wild because they lose the ability to survive in the forest. That is how we kind of gave birth to the Elephant Conservation and Care Center, which is a couple of hours from Delhi city. And today we've we've helped over 100 elephants so far. And we have about nearly 40 elephants in our care as we speak. And we built India's first elephant hospital. And it excites me that we've been able to move so far. Obviously, the universe is supporting us, and people out there are supporting us to make this happen.
Will you lay out the whole situation a little bit more? Like, how many elephants are in captivity in India?
The official number is in the region of about 2,600 or so.
Once they're in captivity because they have a job, right? Like somebody's making them do something that they don't want to do. And so what are most of their jobs?
So most captive elephants, nearly 3,000 of them, are either working in temples or in the logging industry, or they are doing street begging or tourism. These are primarily the work that they're used for. But a little earlier, they were also used in circuses.
They're all brutalized to be in these jobs, right? None of them are good. It's not like one's better than the other.
That's true. In order to make an elephant be rideable, so a group of tourists can sit on them, or you want the elephant to march through the streets on a busy street with traffic all around, or you want the elephant to perform rituals at a temple, you need to have the elephant trained to a great level of cooperation. And no wild animal, the elephant's a wild animal, it's from the deep jungle. So no wild animal is going to cooperate without a great level of training. And unfortunately, the quickest way to train and maintain an elephant in captivity and force it to perform such tasks is a negative reinforcement method, which involves beating, chaining, shackling, hobbling, a certain amount of abuse, torture, pain, and exploitation.
And they're expensive, so people don't want to give these elephants up.
Yes, it's a big challenge to get the elephants out of the ownership because we also have an illegal elephant trafficking cartel that's in operation at the moment, and we are having to lock horns with them quite often. And so there's a huge price to pay, in terms of our safety is compromised while dealing with these people. But these elephants are worth a lot of money, and some of them sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, albeit they are not legally allowed to be sold, purchased, leased, or rented. But yet it happens. Somewhat like the drug industry, wildlife trafficking, illegal wildlife trafficking is second next to narcotics, drugs, gun running, and human trafficking. It's in
Yeah.
that league.
And where are they being trafficked to? Like, how do you traffic an elephant?
Well, the paperwork is forged.
Okay.
You can't make an elephant disappear, but you'd be surprised. It's taken us weeks and months sometimes to find an elephant, knowing that we've got the police teams looking for the elephant, we've got the forest department looking, we've got informers out in the field, and an elephant can disappear in a city like Delhi. Can you believe it? It's like losing an elephant in New York, right? It's it's ridiculous, but it does happen. And these elephants, you'd be surprised, reach different places. They can be moved hundreds of miles to different places. They sometimes are moved out of the country to Nepal, and sometimes they come in through Nepal and they go to different places. And we are still in the process of investigating where these elephants go to. It's such a big industry. It's such a secretive cartel that operates this whole thing. It's all mafia driven, so it makes it very challenging for us to work in the
Right.
field. Protecting elephants puts our staff at risk. We have 3 legal teams working to just protect us and protect the elephants in our custody. We have to have security round the clock at our facilities and to ensure that the safety of our staff is taken care of. And yeah, so it is not easy.
Oh, I had no idea it was that intense. Then how would an elephant end up with you? Like, how does it get to you?
So typically, if we find an elephant in very bad shape and we are able to alert the forest department or the authorities to it, then we work with them and help them, assist them in enforcement of the law. One of the reasons that our Elephant Conservation and Care Center was created was because very often when the enforcement authorities would confiscate an elephant or seize an elephant because it was illegal or it was blind or it was being abused or exploited, they would have nowhere to send it to except a zoo. And zoos would not want these elephants because they're decrepit, they're old, they're broken, they're blind, and it takes a lot of human resources to care for this elephant, plus a lot of money. So, if very often a confiscated elephant would be returned to the offender through the court process because the forest department would not have a place to keep it, and he would get it on custody, temporary custody, back from the forest department. It's like returning an abused child back to the abuser.
Right.
So that was one of the purposes of our creating the Elephant Conservation and Care Center. And now, when there is a seizure or a confiscation, the authorities can send the elephant officially to us. They send them through a court order. The courts insist that we care for those animals, and then those animals then come to Wildlife SOS, the Elephant Conservation and Care Center, where we provide them long-term medical care and lifetime support for the rest of their lifetime till they die. They will stay there in the safety and protection of our care.
That's incredible that you've done this and that you have 40 there. 40 elephants is a lot of elephants to take care of.
Yes, it is, and it's bloody expensive.
Yeah.
We have to raise a ton of money to help these animals. We're constantly expanding and getting more land to be able to house these animals. And I'd love to have you come over and take a walk with them. Come and meet them.
I would love
That's one of the
to.
things you
I
should
would.
do.
I think I will. I will take you up on that for certain.
In fact, Beth, we have an active volunteer program where people from any walk of life across the world can just sign up and come and volunteer with us. We have a volunteer house, an international volunteer house with 16 bedrooms where people can come, stay. We have common areas, we have great Indian food, and everybody gets a chance to go and volunteer with our elephants and our rescued bears, and you get to work shoulder to shoulder with me and the team on the ground, helping these animals, watching them heal, and helping them through the healing journeys,
Very
and
cool.
encouraging them, and also a little bit of culture and tourism on the side. So it's a great volunteer vacation kind of thing.
Right. Let's talk about that a little bit because I just spoke with a guy a week or two ago, and we were talking about people going and volunteering with wild animals who have been rescued. And there's really good volunteering where you go and it's animals in recovery and you're doing work there. And then there's also volunteering where you're going and people are really unaware that they're not going into such good places. And there's a lot of that, especially, well, everywhere, pretty much. I mean, even in the US, that happens. Tourism and ecotourism and voluntourism, like I still think a lot of people don't know what's okay to do with wild animals and what's really not okay because they see all this stuff on social media and they see people they admire or respect or like or a friend or a celebrity doing something not okay, but that makes it okay. Right? Will you talk about that a little bit and what you guys see in the tourism industry?
Of course, the whole concept of ecotourism or voluntourism, as they call it sometimes, is fairly new. And yes, it's very easy for people to get carried away, misguided, and even misled intentionally sometimes by unethical tourist operators who will, for example, there is a company in Jaipur that masquerades as an elephant sanctuary, and they trap, it's a tourist trap, and they try to get people saying, oh, you can paint elephants, you can wash elephants, you can do this, you can do that. And basically it's a tourist trap. They exploit the elephants, they make people paint, use lead paint on these animals, and very often people post about it saying, oh my god, I had a great time. It's a small experience for them, but what they have done is only perpetuating the whole abuse. The whole
Yes.
cycle of abuse continues. So it's important for people to understand that any place that offers you to bathe the elephant, ride an elephant, paint an elephant, is absolutely a place that you must avoid like the plague. Stand far away from it, never go there, because that is a place that's unethical. That's a place that is abusing elephants.
I think in the US and in the EU too, it's kind of become common knowledge that you don't ride an elephant. I think most people are now aware that it's really bad to ride. But somehow this message that it's okay to bathe them and paint them didn't get through. That, oh, riding's bad, but bathing and painting is okay. And it drives me crazy because you see people with that on social media and it's not that much different. And so I want like people to really get like how it's abuse.
And sometimes people buy paintings that are painted by elephants.
Yes.
Again, an elephant doing a painting with a trunk involves a lot of training, a lot of abuse, and it's best to not help perpetrate that kind of abuse constantly. And it's something that we must really avoid, because a place that's ethical, there are a few around the world, but a place that's ethical will not be talking about riding elephants, bathing elephants, painting them, or having them do anything like massage. I know some places in Thailand that will make a baby elephant step on you and massage you, or paint art for you that you can take away, obviously for a fee. But these are commercial tourist traps, and that I think that people who are animal lovers, especially people who care about nature, people who care about wildlife, must be conscious and empower yourselves with knowledge. In fact, I'd like to say that we have a campaign called Refuse to Ride. And there's a website called refusetoride.org, refusetoride.org. And I would encourage everybody who's listening to this to go to this website and check it out, because this has got a lot of information which will empower you with knowledge of how to recognize the elephants that are in distress. I mean, if you see an elephant that, or many elephants that are, displaying stereotypic behavior, this will show you how to recognize that stereotypic behavior. If they have disfigured spines, because when tourists ride on them, they put these saddles or these stands, they call them howdahs, and they put them on top, and that disfigures the spine. The animal is handicapped and crippled for life. If you see them with sunken temples, disfigured bodies, handicapped legs, you will see a lot of this. And by going to this website, www.refusetoride.org, you can really empower yourself. You will then be equipped to identify issues in the field. There's also a petition that we're doing to encourage people to be more aware. So while you're looking at this website, feel free to sign that petition and send it our way. It'll really help us to sensitize more people. And when we have 50,000 signatures, we hope to send it to the minister over here and get them to understand how important it is.
There's nothing better than the privilege of being able to watch any wild animal. So the need to interact, it's some weird thing that it's contagious. And it's usually the irony, it's usually animal lovers who want to do these things because they love animals. They're not bad. They're just completely unaware of what's behind the scenes. That's why I can't stress it enough, because a lot of animal lovers listen to this. Watching is awesome. And that's the only thing we should ever do. And so India is doing so much good work. The conservation scene in India is incredible. But what is it for elephants? Because it doesn't feel like temple elephants are going away anytime soon, or any of this is going away anytime soon. Is there work to end some of this going on?
I know the ecosystem and the landscape looks challenging, but there are steps being made. I think it'll be harder and harder for temples and other places to use elephants. I think the fact that people out there, like listeners of your podcast, are very aware, and people will actively stop engaging with places where elephants are being used, exploited, or abused. And the government of India has already banned zoos from keeping elephants, so they can't acquire new elephants. The Supreme Court has stopped ownership certificates being issued. There's a lot of new litigative work that's been carried out by several organizations. A lot of judicial sensitivity is going on. So I think there's a lot of good work. It's promising. Yes, but I can't help being cynical by what's going on in the past. But I still do think that our government in India is sensitive. They are very responsive, and they followed a democratic process to bring amendments into the act, into the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. The fact that you still cannot kill any animal, unlike the US, where you can shoot anything. Here you cannot shoot anything. You cannot kill anything. Any animal shooting is poaching. There is no hunting season at all. But that said, there are some changes which will help us regulate the whole movement of elephants. It's been made mandatory for every elephant to have a microchip. So I think things will start improving. But there is a move by certain segments of elephant ownership who are trying to ensure that they can, retain ownership of offspring of captive elephants, things like that. So that's something that we have to deal with. I mean, it's a legacy we've inherited, unfortunately, and something we cannot wish away. So I feel that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm a very optimistic person. I do like to think in a very positive direction. And I feel that as long as everybody, the mass, the public mass, and everybody out there is heading in the right direction, I think we can catalyze anyone to head that way. And I feel that the future of elephants is probably the safest in India because we are the last stronghold.
Yeah.
We've lost 98% of our Asian elephant population, but India is still home to 50% of the present Asian elephant population. So we've got to do everything we can to save them. If we cannot protect them in India, we can't protect them anywhere else in the world.
We did a news story, actually, I think like 6 months ago, that somebody made a robot elephant, and it looks just like an elephant for a temple elephant. That's where we should be going for these entertainment elephants. They should all be robots.
Absolutely. That would be great. And we're trying to also get one to use as an educational device. It costs about $8,000 or $9,000, I think. But it's a great way to educate people. The only thing is that a lot of these places where they hold elephants in captivity, live elephants in captivity, the fact that they have elephants becomes a status symbol. So a robotic elephant, unfortunately, might not cut it in some of these places. Right. And so we are talking about, age-old myths and age-old culture and traditions that we have to combat. It is possible to overcome those, but it just needs a out-of-the-box approach. And sometimes you have to find solutions that are radical to combat such processes.
Well, you did it with the bears.
Exactly. I must confess that the success that we've had with the bears does give us the confidence. Success is infectious. We feel we can solve this. And the fact that we've set up the elephant hospital, India's first conservation center for elephants, we have the land, it's expanding. We've helped over 100 elephants. We've rescued over 40 elephants. We think we are heading in the right trajectory. All we need is more support. And I sometimes feel like I might have to go rob some banks. But, financial support sometimes seems to be our biggest problem. I wish it was easier to get the funds to move forward faster. I'm so impatient. But unfortunately, those greenbacks are hard to come by.
Let's hope they keep coming in because you need to save more elephants and stop this whole trade. I'm so grateful for today. Thank you so much. To learn more about Kartik and Wildlife SOS, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like to support the podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. Go to our website, speciesunite.com, and click donate. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knutson, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke, Ayana Peoples, Olivia Deming, and Anna Kolner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.